The House will come to order. Today's Pledge of Allegiance is by Tobin Snook from STEM Lab, North Glen, Colorado, and he is the son of Representative Faith Winter.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, on which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nice job, Tobin. Please read the roll.
Representative Art. Becker J. Becker K. Representative Kay Becker.
Excuse.
Beckman. Benavides. Bridges. Buck. Buckner. Carver. Catlin. Coleman. Covarrubias. Danielson. Good morning. Escar. Everett. Exum. Representative Exum.
Morning.
Excuse.
Foote. Representative Foote.
Excuse.
Garnett. Janal. Gray. Hamner. Hanson. Harrod. Hooten. Humphrey. Jackson. Kennedy. Kennedy.
Excused.
Wow. Kraft Tharp. Landgraf. Lawrence. Lawrence.
Excused.
Lepsock. Lee. Leonard. Lewis. Liston. Lontine. Lundeen. McKean. McLaughlin. Melton. Representative Melton.
Excused.
Michelson Janae. Mitch Bush. Navarro. Neville. Nordberg. Pabon. Pedersen. Rankin. Ransom. Rosenthal. Sane. Salazar. Sias. Singer. Representative Singer.
Excused.
Thurlow. Valdez. Van Winkle. Weissman. Willett. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Wist. Young. Madam Speaker.
Present. With 58 present and 7 excused, we have a quorum. Representative Lewis.
After that,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the reading of the Journal of Monday, March 27th, 2017 be dispensed with and approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Members, you have heard the motion. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying no. Motion passes. Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So members, this is a very special day.
Hold on one second.
All right.
Please proceed, Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish I had one of those for my classroom when I teach. Members, this is a very special day here in the chamber. It is House District 9 Stellar Student Day. So I bring one student from every school in my district down to the Capitol and give them a commendation for all the great and hard work they do. So we have students with the last names of Mongar, Brown, Howell, Ramirez, Rascon, Tate, Moreno, Boampong, Dubrovin, Snyder, Forster, and Nichols. Let's give them all a hand as they stand with their families. Thank you for all your hard work.
Welcome to the Capitol. Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So members, I also have a tribute this morning to a very special young lady who's not just a stellar student, and I'd like young Lyric Howell to stand, and actually she's so short, so can we put her up on the stage? Can we put her up here? We can't see her otherwise. I want you to go up to where the speaker is, okay? Oh, she's so cute. All right. You can't see her. There she is. All right. So Lyric Howell is a kindergartner at Southmore Elementary, and she has demonstrated that compassion knows no age. She is a young lady who at an early age possesses a deep sympathy for others. Lyric and her older sister have exemplified this characteristic by organizing a class bake sale to help refugees without her parents' knowledge and her teacher's assistance. Her bake sale gained the attention of the school, and dozens of families have since asked to participate. They raised $916. The money raised will be donated to newly arrived refugee families in Denver. The members of the Colorado House of Representatives are proud to recognize Lyric Howell for her hard work and wish her continued success and all her honorable endeavors. Signed by Crisanta Duran, Speaker of the House of Representatives. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you so much, Lyric. Further announcements or introductions? Representative Lawrence and Representative Arndt.
Switch sides. Let's switch.
Oh, I've never been on the left side.
She's always on my left. Go ahead.
This is very awkward. I just wanted to take a moment and welcome representatives from CSG West, Edgar Ruiz and
Jeffrey Miller,
who are with us this week visiting different members. And I also wanted to recommend to each of you to look seriously into applying for the Western Legislative Academy that's held down in Colorado Springs. And for those of you who want to go even a little step further for a leadership course, I would really recommend looking into the Toll Fellows program. I went through that program last year and it is excellent. And this is an organization that is very, very bipartisan, so you really get a great balanced view of running legislation, working together, and how to actually get things done in a state legislature or a state senate.
Yeah, and I'm just here to lend my voice. I serve as vice chair of the Ag and Water Committee for CSG West. It's a great group. The annual meeting is coming up in Tacoma, Washington on August 15, 16, 17, 18. You'll make connections with other Western legislators that have served me well and will serve you well too. So we really encourage that. It's totally nonpartisan. It's a smaller group than NCSL, which is massive, and it brings you together with other Western legislators. And we can't say enough, and we're glad to have Edgar and Jeffrey on the floor. And there he is.
And for those of you who are interested, I'm the chair of the CSG West Trends Board. So we're going to be looking at trending topics for the Western United States. If you have ideas that you want to come down and share with me, we can talk about that, because this is, as you all know, things are going to be changing from the top down. So this is the time to start having those discussions. But please get involved with CSG West. It's a great organization. And as Representative Art said, it's a smaller group. So you really get to know people from the Western United States.
Thank you.
Thank you for the announcements for introductions. Representative McLaughlin.
Catlin, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Rep. Catlin and I have a
Representative
tribute.
Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Randall, could you please?
Great,
read
let
the
me help you out. You have a tribute? Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Randall, would you please read the tribute?
The House of Representatives convened in the 71st General Assembly hereby extends sincere commendations to John Porter. Mr. John Porter has been a knowledgeable, steadfast voice on water policy during his years of service on the board of the Southwestern Water Conservation District. Serving since 1990 and as the board president since 2007, he has been not only an advocate for agriculture, but also has a great mind concerning all beneficial uses of water. As manager of the Dolores Water Conservancy District, he was a strong advocate for the construction of McPhee Reservoir and saw the water delivery system for irrigation and municipal supplies to fruition. Mr. Porter has been an invaluable resource for the entire 9-county SWCD region and for the state of Colorado. Mr. Porter served 4 terms on the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority Board, was an original board member on the Interbasin Compact Committee representing the Southwest Basin Roundtable, was a founding board member of the Colorado Foundation for Water Education, and still serves as a Colorado representative on the board of the Colorado River Water Users Association. Mr. Porter was also recognized by the Colorado Water Congress with the prestigious Aspinall Award. The members of the Colorado House of Representatives are proud to recognize and thank John Porter for his dedicated service to Montezuma County and to the state of Colorado. On request of Representative Barbara McLaughlin, given this 28th day of March 2017, State Capitol in Denver.
Representative Catlin. Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to introduce all of you to John Porter and his wife, Nancy. If you could give them a round of applause in the back, please. Also with them are his daughter, Marcia Porter Norton. Representing the Southwest Water Conservation District is Bruce Whitehead and his daughter, Risa. And listening in today is John Porter's granddaughter, Laura, with her husband, Sergio, who have a brand new baby, Jonah.
Thank you, and welcome to the Capitol. Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'd like to say a few words in regards to John Porter. He's been a fixture in the water community for decades. You heard what was said about the accomplishments that he's made as an individual, but I don't think that you heard what he's done for his community. Those awards were recognizing what he had done, but his community has thrived from the work that he's done in the southwest part of the state of Colorado. You know, he's been awarded everything that the water community can award a person. He's received them all, but one of the things that I'd like to tell you the most is that he is a fine man. He's a man that cares, he's a man that takes action, and he's a man that listens. He's listened to his community when it came time to build new dams, new structures, those kind of things. And he carried that message with him wherever he went, whether it be coming to Denver or going to Washington, D.C. It was his efforts that got a lot of those things accomplished. He will tell you that's not just him, but it takes a leader, and John Porter has been a leader, truly a leader. I've tried to pattern my approach to the water issues in the state of Colorado like John Porter. A man that doesn't say a lot, but does take action, and a person that does care. That's John Porter. He cares about the state of Colorado, not just his Southwest District, but he cares about the state of Colorado. I truly appreciate his dedication, his knowledge, and his skills. But most of all, I appreciate his laugh. He's got a distinctive laugh, and you know he's in the room, and you know he can be as tough as anybody in the place. But after it's all over, he's still got that laugh and still recognizes people as friends, neighbors, and colleagues. You know, it's my great honor today to recognize John Porter, a man that I hope that I'll be like when I grow up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Porter. Representative McLaughlin.
You call me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And very quickly, retired Justice Hobbs wrote a poem about John Porter, and not many of us get a poem written by retired Supreme Court Justice, so I thought I'd read it. Pretty
Representative
short.
McLaughlin, before you do that, hold on a moment.
Thank you.
Representative McLaughlin.
This is written by retired Justice, Supreme Court Justice Greg Hobbs for John Porter. When you're in a really bad drought, when you need a gentle rain from the cradle of the sleeping Ute, from the canyons, mesas, furrow rows, across the shining mountains, across the mountain parks. When most you need to call upon the peoples of the great Southwest to gather themselves together, the rays of all thirst-quenching hope, you call on John. Thank you, John Porter.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Representative Valdez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you, Representative McLaughlin and Representative Catlin. Members, John Porter, we thank you for your service, for your dedication and continued dedication as a water buffalo for southwestern Colorado and for the state of Colorado. I thank you.
Thank you, Representative Valdez. Thank you for joining us today. Are there further announcements or introductions? Seeing no further announcements or introductions, reports of committees of reference.
Committee on Education, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1004 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1182 be postponed indefinitely. Senate Bill 68 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Committee on Finance, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1242 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1250 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 139 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
This is an announcement that Representative Asias will be removed as a co-prime sponsor from House Bill 1119. Any further announcements or introductions? Representative Young.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of Appropriations, if you're a member of the House Appropriations Committee, listen up. We are having our appropriations meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. in LSBA. In the calendar, you will see that Senate Bill 17-230, that's the legislative appropriation bill, is on the calendar. I am adding to that calendar House Bill 1242 as well. We'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, 8:30. LSBA. Thank you, members.
Representative Janal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Health Insurance and Environment Committee will meet upon adjournment. We'll be hearing two bills. House Bill 1080 and House Bill 1285. Thank you.
Further announcements or introductions? Seeing no further announcements or introductions, the next order of business is third reading of bills. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1072.
House Bill 1072 by Representatives Landgraf and Lawrence, also Senator Cook, concerning human trafficking for sexual servitude.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1072 on third reading and final passage.
Members, we're in third reading. The question before us is the passage of House Bill 1072 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine. Representative Landgraf. Please close the machine. With 65 yes votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, House Bill 1072 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1224.
House Bill 1224 by Representative Kraft Tharp, also Senator Gardner, concerning penalties for accessing drugs in a manner that violates the Colorado Food and Drug Act.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1224 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of House Bill 1224 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine. Please close the machine. With 65 yes votes, 0 no votes, House Bill 1224 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of Senate Bill 97.
Senate Bill 97 by Senator Martinez Jimenez, also Representative Coleman, concerning the presumption that a conveyance of an interest in land also conveys an interest in adjoining property consisting of a vacated right-of-way.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 97 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is a passage of Senate Bill 97 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Randall, please open the machine. Please close the machine. With 51 yes votes, 14 no votes, Senate Bill 97 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. The next order of business is second reading of bills, general orders. Representative Gray. Wow, it's a rowdy bunch out there today. Members, you have heard the motion. All of those in favor signify by saying aye. Representative Gray will definitely take the chair.
Now the committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, bills will be read by title unless there is a request for a bill to be read at length. Committee amendments will not be read unless they are as they are printed in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads and not read unless requested. Bills will be laid over upon the request of the majority leader, and the code rule is abolished. It's not clear whether I have authority to do that, but I'll give it a shot. Mr. Randall, please read the title of Senate Bill. What? Oh, sorry. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll have a discussion about your abolishment of the coat rule at a later time. I move Senate Bill 184 to be laid over till Monday, April 3rd.
Seeing no objection, Senate Bill 184 will be laid over by one day. No, I'm sorry.
Till Monday, April 3rd.
I'm sorry. Seeing no objection will be laid over until Monday, April 3rd. Now we're good. Mr. Randall, will you please read the title of House Bill 1219?
House Bill 1219 by Representatives Art and McLaughlin, all Senators Crowder and Donovan, concerning extension of the agricultural water leasing pilot program administered by the Colorado Water Conservation Board.
Representative Arndt and McLaughlin. Whoever. Representative McLaughlin will go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. I move House Bill 171219. It's a good bill. It helps farmers, ranchers. There is no committee report. And there is no committee report.
To the bill.
To the bill, please. Okay, this bill expands, it's a pilot project. It expands the number of fallowing areas, and it expands the amount of time that they can do this. It's good for ranchers, it's good for farmers, it's good for water rights.
Members, there have been some question about the number of projects included in this bill and why would we expand it. This is a purely permissive bill to allow up to 5 projects in each of the 4 river basins, not totaling more than 20. And one of the concerns was the amount of water that could be included. And the CWCB's criteria and guidelines provide for a cap on the amount of acre feet that can be used in total. So I think that concern has been addressed, and we urge an aye vote on this good bill.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1219? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1219. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. House Bill 1219 passes. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1190. No, I'm sorry. I just keep doing that. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1190, two bills till after House Bill 1256.
Seeing no objection, House Bill 1190 will be laid over two bills behind House Bill 1256. Mr. Randall, please read the title of House Bill 1236.
House Bill 1236, Representative Kennedy, all Senators Quorum and Smallwood, concerning preparation by the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing of healthcare provider expenditure reports.
Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1236 and the Health Insurance and Environment Committee report.
To the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the Health Insurance and Environment Committee, we added two amendments. One was a small technical fix. The other was a request of the Hospital Association that we accommodated by including some existing reporting that's going on under the scope of the reports that are authorized by this bill. I ask for a yes vote.
Is there any other discussion of the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The committee report is adopted. To the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 1236 is all about hospital transparency. We've seen some other transparency measures this session. This is both transparency for consumers, but also transparency for policymakers. The reality is, with as much money as we're spending on hospitals, which make up 37% of our total healthcare expenditures, not to mention $2.8 billion of public money every year, we really don't have a great idea of how that money is being spent within our hospital system. So what this bill does is it requires the hospitals to submit two reports to Healthcare Policy and Financing that they're already producing every year. Let me repeat, this does not add any burden to the hospitals. They are already producing these reports. We are just asking them to now provide copies to Healthcare Policy and Financing so they could produce an expenditure report every year breaking down a variety of different ways we're spending money in our healthcare system. I've been bringing up one example that I think is really compelling. Over the last few years, we've actually reduced our uncompensated care in the state from $2.6 billion down to $1 billion a year, and yet we have no idea how that breaks down from one hospital to the next. That means we don't really have a great sense of whether we're allocating our hospital provider fee dollars effectively. When we hear about the issues that are going on with rural hospitals, and yet we see our metro area hospitals continuing to break ground on new facilities all the time, I think we really have a responsibility to take a closer look at this and understand how the hospitals are spending our money. So, in the long term, the hope is that we come up with some ideas from this bill and from the reports that are produced here that we can use to craft future policies to address the growing costs of healthcare that are impacting constituents in every district across the state. So I ask for your support.
Is there any other discussion of House Bill 1236? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1236. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. House Bill 1236 is passed. Mr. Randall, will you please read the title of House Bill 1256?
House Bill 1256 by Representative Foote, all Senators Aguilar and Jones, concerning clarification of the minimum distance from which certain oil and gas facilities must be located from any school.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1256 and the Health, Insurance, and Environment Committee report.
To the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee report reflects two amendments that we made in the committee, of course. One amendment trues up the definitions that we had in the bill regarding wells and oil and gas facilities with the existing definitions that are in the COGCC definitions. And then the second amendment also narrowed the school property definition that we had in the bill. And I ask for an aye vote on the committee report.
Is there any other discussion of the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Committee report is adopted. To the bill. Representative Foote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can spend a lot of time talking about this bill, but I think that maybe more effective is putting up a picture about what this bill deals with. Members, the picture that you see in front of you is a picture of Northridge High School taken in 2014 right before their graduation ceremonies. You see a drill rig that is a mere 100 feet from the property line of Northridge High School. It's about 1,300 feet, though, from the front door of Northridge High School, so it is within the current rules that we have. But 100 feet from the property line of the high school. You see a football field, you see a running track, and these are issues in our current rules. These are issues that we need to address as legislators because we see that the rules really aren't working the way that they should, and that's to protect, in this case, kids that are using the running track, kids that are using the football field, and other facilities. And I'll just tell you, the Northridge High School picture you see in front of you is not the only school that's been affected. There are a number of schools that are affected, and that's going to continue to increase as the industry continues to move more into neighborhoods and closer to neighborhood schools as time goes on because they want to drill more and more into these neighborhoods. So it's an issue that we have seen since the 2013 rules were promulgated. As I said, this picture was taken in 2014, and it's an issue that we expect to see going forward. And it's an issue that needs to be addressed. And that's exactly what this bill does. In this picture that you see before you at Northridge High School, all this bill would do would be to move the facility about 900 feet away from where it is now. It would be 1,000 feet away from the property line, which you see is where the fence is, and instead of 1,000 feet, or in this case, 1,300 feet away from the school. It's a very narrow bill. It's a bill that's designed to make sure that we don't have these large industrial operations next to school facilities and playgrounds and child care centers. It's a very reasonable bill, and I hope that you'll vote yes on this bill.
Thank you, Representative Foote. System Minority Leader Wist.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, the more things change, the more they remain the same. We're back again this year to talk about trying to take back control from the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. I think we handled this issue perfectly last session. I hope we'll do it again this year. The additional thing we got last session was guidance from the Supreme Court of our state, who said that the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is the authority on this issue. So let's talk about the issue of setbacks. Currently, the COGCC requires oil and natural gas production facilities to be located at least 1,000 feet from school buildings and other high occupancy buildings, unless that is not feasible. And in those rare cases where a 1,000-foot setback is not feasible, the COGCC requires a full hearing. And if it approves a different setback, it imposes stringent mitigation conditions in those instances. So what this bill does is it changes the minimum 1,000-foot distance from which newly permitted oil and gas production facilities and wells must be located from school and child care center property lines rather than the building, and that's the important distinction. So where have we been on this issue? Well, the COGCC in 2013 adopted very strict regulations. And again, just as a reminder for our members, we have the most strictly regulated oil and gas profession in the country. In the country. And yet this bill wants to assert and impose new regulations on the industry. The governor created the Oil and Gas Task Force in 2014, where setbacks were discussed at length. So where does this leave us? Well, CDPHE released a study this year which showed that living near oil and gas operations is protective of public health, with the data collected by the state of Colorado showing that emissions are well within the air quality standards established by the Environmental Protection Agency. The study does not indicate the need for public health action. What this bill actually does is negatively impact Colorado's economy. It's nearly doubling the current requirement in many cases. We should continue to trust the COGCC and CDPHE to handle these issues. There's no legislation needed in this area. Members, we simply need to butt out and to allow the process to continue to work as it has very, very well. I urge a no vote on 1256.
Chairman of the esteemed Finance Committee, Representative Pavone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And normally I don't come down on these oil and gas bills. I normally defer to my friends and colleagues on both sides of the aisle that are much more versed in these issues than I am. But this is rich, so I had to weigh in on this. So here's what I'm hearing so far, and I'll wait to hear the rest of the debate because I'm sure there's other fine points that will be made against this bill. But, and again, I don't delve into these issues, so forgive me. I'm just playing personal representative today. I don't have expertise in this issue, I'll freely admit. But here's what I know. If you've got a school building and you've got a playground or you've got a sports field or you've got any type of outdoor activity and next to it you've got a wellhead that could have some public safety issues, does that make any sense whatsoever? And what's interesting about this is, and I know a few things about distances and property lines from my work as a real estate attorney, is that when we set restrictions and distance restrictions in place for other types of businesses, we don't use the structure itself, we use the property line. So this is not any different than what we do under our normal distance restrictions piece. But here's the other thing that caught my attention on this, was that, one, we had the Colorado Court of Appeals decision recently that came out that said public safety is a prerequisite to what the COGCC must do, and that is only a few days old, so if you haven't had a chance to read that yet, you should. To me, this honors that decision. But lastly, COGCC has the authority to do this. There's no doubt about that. We recognize that. But who gives them that authority? The state legislature. So the COGCC doesn't just act on its own without any accountability, without any oversight. The Colorado legislature is tasked with that. And this says to them, and this says to everyone else, if you're going to drill, if you're going to put a wellhead in place, just put it a certain distance from the property line of a school and their facilities, please. I rise in strong support of this bill.
Thank you. Minority Leader Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question for the sponsors. I was curious if the 4 wells that were being used as examples in Weld County, if these were existing wells prior to the school building on next to it, or were these wells drilled and built after the school had built next to them? Okay, I see no answer here. Well, I think we heard testimony from a Weld County commissioner that stated that these were existing oil and gas facilities that were built on next to. So the oil and gas facilities that are being referenced as examples here were actually existing prior to the school building these parks and facilities next to it.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, Mr. Chair, this is not a partisan issue where I live. I have Republicans coming to my office all the time, very upset with the fact that these kinds of facilities are drilling down right underneath their houses in Broomfield and in Thornton. In fact, I would invite my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to come to our meetings, where you have Republicans there saying, I didn't buy my house to have it devalued by having these kinds of facilities sitting right next to us. With the noise, the smell, the traffic, and watching my property value go down 25%. In fact, I'll invite them to my office, and then I'll invite all of you to my office, so that way you can hear from them. Because they're a little upset that we have these kinds of operations right next to schools where their children are. And in fact, I'm willing to even invite our fire departments to my office and then have you there too. That way you can listen to our fire departments talk about how they don't have the capacity to stop an accident that could occur from these operations, because they do happen. That's not what people went and bought their homes for. $500,000 homes, $1 million homes. So that way they can have this thing sticking up there right outside their backyards and outside of their schools, watching their property values plummet. Where's the property rights groups then? I support this bill because I've been to countless meetings where our neighbors are located, both Democrat and Republican, and they're saying, we need to stop this. When they're drilling right outside of schools in urban areas where there are neighborhoods with 1,000 homes, they say we need to stop this. I support this bill. It's a good bill because it's good for our communities, regardless of who's living in them, regardless of what their party politics are. This is a good bill. It protects our children from the inevitable, and it is inevitable. We see accidents happening every single day with this industry. Every single day with this industry. I support this bill. Thank you very much, Representative Foote, for standing up for all your constituents, regardless of their politics.
Representative McKean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I don't support this bill. Shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody. In Loveland, we had a very, very strong group come and try to pass a ban on hydraulic fracturing and oil development in our town, and it was an interesting process because what we really did was we took on to ourselves the study of what these facilities do and how they impact our citizens. We looked at their private property rights. We looked at all property rights. So here's the amazing thing, because we got in this discussion the other day about equal protection under the law. We also owe all the people who have property rights protection under the law, whether it be a gravel pit, whether it be somebody buying a house, whether it be somebody operating an agricultural facility, dairy, other things. Because, I don't know if anybody has told my right honorable friend, but dairy farms smell. And they impact some of the people who live next to them. And yet, it's so important because I drink milk, you drink milk, and guess what? I drive my car, you drive your car, you drive your Jeep. One of the things that I testified at the Oil and Gas Task Force, and I came third. I came after Barb Kirkmeyer, I came after Elise Jones, and the last comment from one of those early testifiers was, Boulder County doesn't need oil and gas, which aroused some laughter, and then it got a little quiet because people realized that since we were in Larimer County, people had to drive there. And even some of my dearest friends in this house understand that Boulder County still needs oil and gas. So one of the things that I think we need to look at is what's the intent of this? Is the intent to try to close out more land that can't have oil and gas development on it, or is it to operate this industry in the safest, best way that it is currently done? The absolute pinnacle of technology for what we do in this industry. And when we say that there are issues with it every day, it's simply not true. It's simply not true that we have significant things that happen. Oh, well, actually, sometimes when I drop a quart can of oil as I'm changing the oil in one of my cars, that's right, that's considered a spill in this world. So when we talk about what these incidents are, we need to understand this is the safest, most regulated industry we have. When you look at what we do and how we do it, we should be proud. I rise in opposition to this bill.
Representative Lebsack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to my colleague from Loveland. This bill isn't about a fracking ban. My colleague mentioned a proposal from his city that would have banned fracking. This isn't banning fracking. In fact, what this bill says is, if you're going to frack, please don't frack within 1,000 feet from my child on the swing set. That's what this bill says. This bill says, you know what? We respect the industry. We respect the COGCC, is what this bill says. However, what we do not like is fracking going on just a few hundred feet away from my child on the swing set. And for that reason, I'm a yes on the bill.
Representative McKean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, my colleague. I will tell you, the remarkable thing is we protect those kids already. We protect them in remarkable ways. With the setbacks that are currently in place by COGCC, we have a significant amount of space between those facilities. And here's the other thing. As was mentioned, these are schools and facilities that are built close to wells, not wells that are built close to facilities, for the most part. And I will tell you, when you start looking at the conditions of approval process, when you start looking into the depth of what COGCC does, safety is the very first thing. When I was first considering this in Loveland, the very first call I made was to the Department of Public Health in Weld County. What are the problems you're seeing? What kind of bolus of illness or whatever is there? Because you can find no more densely explored area than Weld County. And told unequivocally, came to testify at one of our hearings, we are not seeing problems from this. We are not seeing what I think the great assumption is being made here, that there is some harm to what is going on with the current setbacks. We're not seeing it. Again, are we passing a bill to correct a problem? No. We're doing something in whipsaw reaction to the way we feel.
Representative Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I sat through all of the hearing and all of the testimony, and there was something that I asked a question to COGCC about, tell me why you're really opposed to this bill. And they said that this is going to take away too much land, 0.008% land in Colorado that would be impacted by this bill. And then they talked about the fact that if they had to do 1,000 feet from the school property, they're talking about acres of land, because a school can sit on acres of land. And I said, you mean to tell me right now you can put a well on that acreage of land anywhere? And they actually told me, yes, they can go right now in front of the COGCC to make sure if there is a spot that they want to drill that's right next to the school, they can ask for that. We're not just talking about 1,000 feet away from the school. That's the standard. But right now, they can go and they can request to be even closer than that 1,000 feet from the building. I don't know if they meant to tell me that on the mic, but they did. And that's really when I had an aha moment on this bill. So right now, the standard is 1,000 feet from a school building. But if you want to drill closer than that 1,000 feet, you just have to go ask permission and get it granted. All we're saying is 1,000 feet from the property line of the school. Stay out of our school area. Let the kids have safe space to do what they want to do, whether it's soccer, whether it's, I think this looks like maybe a graduation. But right now, I just wanted to keep that in mind. The way the law is written right now, they can go and they can request to be 1,000 feet between the school building and 1,000 feet if they really wanted to. That's too close to comfort for me. I urge a no vote.
Representative Liston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, members, when I see this picture, and I understand it's up in Weld County, what I see is economic activity and taxes that are being paid by good, hardworking people in the oil and gas industry. And in fact, I would venture to say that school and that graduation the graduation ceremony, to a large degree, is probably courtesy of the oil and gas industry, which has brought in jobs and economic activity and tens of thousands of dollars that probably paid for a good portion of that school up there. And the other thing, when I look at that picture, is that is just a moment in time. That oil and gas rig is only there for a matter of days or a few weeks at the very, very most. And then when they do find oil and gas, which our Colorado economy is significantly based upon, then they take the rig down, they have the infrastructure, the wellhead, and they make a nice little building around it, or a playground area that you would never realize that the oil and gas wellhead that is paying tens of thousands of dollars in taxes is even there. So the other thing, it sounds, one of the colleagues on the other side of the aisle was talking about how dangerous and that people are being hurt every single day in the oil and gas industry. Well, personally, I dispute that, because if people were being hurt in the oil and gas industry every day, we would be reading about it in the newspaper, and I don't see it in the newspaper at all. The oil and gas industry, they are probably the most sensitive people to making sure that their workers work by the rules that they set down, because they are the last people that they want to have injured. And I'm very, very confident, and I'm sure that we have statistics that would back this up, that the oil and gas industry is extremely safe. They're hardworking individuals. They're dedicated to their profession, and they're the last people that want to have injury not only upon themselves, but especially for the kids. I'm sure that Representative Foote is well-meaning in this, but I think it's misguided. I would urge a no vote on House Bill 1256. Thank you.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I encourage a yes vote. If there's one thing I hear about in Longmont, aside from our booming industry in, I don't know, computers and microbreweries, it's this. It's the idea that we can have a fracking well next to a school when we know that there have been spills. Representative Foote put it incredibly well. When you have 100 times the level of benzene, cancer-causing benzene that's deemed safe, next to a school, something's amiss. And my voters woke up. My voters woke up before I did. And they looked at this issue and they said, you know what? If this is how things are going to happen, if they're going to drill next to schools, if they're going to drill next to our reservoirs, forget it. You're done. You want to talk about setbacks? The biggest setback for the oil and gas industry would be not passing this bill. Because if we don't pass this bill, my fear, my belief, is that the oil and gas industry will actually become a victim of their own hubris. When I was on the ballot in 2012, I got 22,000 votes. When the ban on fracking was on that same ballot, it got 25,000 votes. 3,000 people disagreed with me, but wanted to do far more than what this bill does. What this bill does is it uses logic, simple logic to say, not in our backyard when it comes to our students and our kids. That's all this does. Without this bill, I actually genuinely believe that my citizens are eventually going to get what they want, a statewide ban on this, because you're going to continue to see this kind of hubris, not only in Denver, not only in Weld County, but all the way over into my neck of the woods, all the way into Boulder County. And ultimately, we're going to be far worse off than if we pass this bill today. So thank you, Representative Foote, for taking a very small step, but a very logical step in making sure that if this happens, we're going to do it safely. We're going to do it outside of our kids' playgrounds and backyards. And I encourage an aye vote.
Representative Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard this bill in committee last week, too, and we heard from a lot of citizens. We heard from the industry. We heard, and ahead of time, I know I checked out the Department of Health report saying that there were not health issues that we needed to be concerned with. 4 years ago, everybody agreed that 1,000 feet from the school was unacceptable and the preferred distance. And most importantly, we do have already safety issues, safety restraints in place. This industry is one of the hardest working industries to make sure that people do stay safe. They have a vested interest in making sure that there aren't accidents and aren't safety issues. And they provide an awful lot of jobs and tax money to the state, and rewarding them by tightening the leash is not the way that we would normally want to help industries that help us as much as they do. So I urge a no vote on this bill and hope that you'll join me.
Representative Willett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad the subject of health risks came up and the fear of potential cancer. I took the time and effort to go to CDPHE's presentation just this week, or last week rather, on their study on the health effects. If you look up here on the display screen, this is the cover sheet from CDPHE. Mike Van Dyke and others came to present. And as a fan of the industry, I expected some pretty good news, but I didn't expect the news to be as good as it actually was. In fact, they have concluded there is such little health risk that they really need do nothing. Imagine a state agency, CDPHE, applying EPA standards, the most restrictive in the nation, determining we're so safe right now we really don't need to do anything. Could you show the next page? Here's the cancer risk. Somebody mentioned cancer. Well, in fact, from this chart, you can see everything is in acceptable range. Some are down closer to negligible. Next slide, please. This chart is incredibly persuasive. These are the 62 chemicals. We heard how awful these chemicals are. And they studied these over 10,000 air monitoring sites across the state for a long period of time. If you look at the bars going up, it's negligible, all but 4 of these. So 58 of the 62 are in negligible. Only 4 even get up to acceptable, and none get into elevated risk. That's how safe our Colorado oil and gas industry is, and we should be proud of them, not critical and attacking of them. Next chart, please. I can't say it any better than this last chart. This is not my chart. Again, look at the bottom right. It's Colorado CDPHE. Based on currently available air monitoring data, the risk of harmful health effects is low for residents living at distances 500 feet or greater from oil and gas operations. Number 2, studies of populations living near oil and gas operations provide limited evidence of the possibility for harmful health effects. Number 3, and this is what I just said, at this time, results from exposure and health effect studies do not indicate the need for immediate public health action, but rather indicate the need for more detailed exposure monitoring and systematic analyses of health effects of residents living near oil and gas operations. So from the West Slope, I have lived with arguments that people's sinks light on fire. Well, the fact is, some of their sinks do light on fire. That is not disputed. However, after the studies were done, they weren't lighting on fire because of oil and gas operations. They were lighting on fire because of natural water wells that had gone bad and other movements under the earth. The next thing we dealt with on the West Slope was an alleged increased level of birth defects. This all hits the news. And we can talk about fake news on both sides of the aisle, and frankly, we currently do and keep doing so. CDPHE studied that in detail, and guess what? No increased birth defects, and particularly no increased birth defects caused by oil and gas operations. So, ladies and gentlemen, every time we hear of all this risk, who should we listen to? I would posit that the CDPHE is not exactly a right-leaning organization. They are applying the most stringent standards in the nation statewide, and they're applying the EPA standards of the past 8-year administration. and still concluding how safe this industry is. So before we start throwing out risks of exposure, of harm, of cancer, let's look at the data. Let's look at the past debunked allegations of whether it's earthquakes, birth defects, lighting, faucets, etc. And finally, why this industry? Why not wind turbines? Why not electrical transmission outfits? Why not sand and gravel? Why not a host of all other industry that, sure, feasibly in 1 out of a million chances could have some sort of a bizarre event that could hurt a football player or somebody on a school ground? This is yet the latest chapter in an unfair assault on a very good industry at a time when our budget's really hurting. And if you think about that and the uptick in the oil and gas industry, severance taxes, FML, maybe we'll then have some monies for Tier 2 events and other budgetary solutions if we would just support the #1 industry in Colorado, 10% of our economy and 200,000 jobs. Please leave it alone.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We heard the words debunked. Well, I'd sure like to maybe take a contingent of our House members to Oklahoma, where science has completely linked earthquakes to the oil and gas industry. In fact, so much so that our friends on the other side of the aisle had to completely backtrack and start developing laws to protect their residents from the number of earthquakes that have occurred. USGS completely showed the link between the two, and the governor even had to backtrack herself because of this belief that there was no linkage between oil and gas operations and earthquakes. And that was just last year that this happened. And I'm just wondering how far behind we are now, and thinking that it's been debunked when it actually hasn't been, or that this idea that it's a safe industry. Do we not recall the Denver Post article that came out? It was actually a series. It was called Drilling Through Danger. Came out about five months ago, talking about what happens when workers are exposed to this industry, the number of deaths that have occurred as a result of being exposed to gas and other toxic chemicals. Or how about big fires that occurred, such as in Weld County, that blew a man's face off and cooked another? What about that? Or how about the big spill that happened at the beginning of this year? 28,000 gallons spilled before the flow was redirected. What about that? That's not fake news, unless you're calling Denver Post fake news. They're right over here, if that's what you want to say. What about that? Doesn't that warrant some type of safety for our children? Is that what we're saying here on the opposite end of the argument? That we shouldn't cite better when it comes to our schools? Because, well, there's nothing to worry about? When do we worry about it? Do we worry about it when something does happen to a school full of children? And how many children then? Is it 10 children who get hurt? 100 children who get hurt? Hundreds of children who get hurt in that school? Is that when we start worrying about it? Or do we just come up with more excuses about how we're just attacking an industry? Maybe that's not what this is about. Maybe this is about protecting people from an industry that does have a history of accidents. In fact, there were over 600 accidents just last year alone. That's almost 2 a day. Well, about one and 3/4 accidents a day. And that was just last year alone. Or how about the Denver Post article that came out on September 27th of 2016 that says that technology could have saved some of the workers, but it was resisted by the industry. Going to say that that's fake news now too? This is about safety of our kids in schools where this bill says, hey, look, we can't stop the oil and gas industry from its production, but what we can do is keep our kids safe. We talk about safety in kids here all the time. It just seems that the conversation changes when we add oil and gas to the mix, and I'm trying to figure that out. You either want children's safety when it comes to schools, or you don't. I don't understand. I do want children to be safe in their schools from an industry that has a history of accidents, and sometimes really, really big ones, devastating accidents. Once again, this is not a partisan effort. I think I will ask my neighbors who are both Democrats and Republicans to come to the Capitol and meet in my office. And I'm going to invite all of you to meet with them too out of your districts. Because as it gets closer to the urban areas, people are becoming more and more concerned. I ask for a yes vote.
Representative Beckman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition of 1256. I care about children. I love children. But this bill takes away significant local control. I was privileged to be an Arapahoe County Commissioner for 12 years. Arapahoe County has the Niobrara Basin, which is very rich in oil and gas and has a lot of oil exploration and development. I was involved extensively in the 2014 Governor Hickenlooper Oil and Gas Task Force, and Arapahoe County was one of the first counties to implement the Memorandum of Understanding, which allowed us to work and negotiate with oil companies with the powers that we had by use of special review and by controlling the above ground things that we can regulate. I wish the picture was still up here of Northridge, because I actually see that as an example of, in Weld County, probably a negotiation between the oil company and the county commissioners. They were having graduation, school was going to be ending, that field was probably going to be empty during the 4 weeks that the actual fracking happens, which is industrial. But after the fracking happens, they cap it, and it's a much different type of facility. The amendment to this bill, and I'd like to speak to the amendment, says that any parcel of real property on which future permanent or temporary school buildings is planned to be constructed within 5 years after an owner or operator files an application for new production facility location, that will be where the property line starts. That's going to be very problematic for Arapahoe County. We have areas out in the very eastern part of our county where we have a fairgrounds and we have acreage for school bus shelters in the future. That is a piece of property that is used for school property, and we would have to probably push the well exploration closer to residential homes if this passes. It takes away local control. I sat through the hearings because I'm on the Health, Environment, and Insurance and Environment Committee, and I will tell you that I was very proud of the people from Arapahoe County, our economic development, and our cities that were very supportive of what Arapahoe County did. It seems like this legislation is very regional and about a district that is having some problems negotiating with the oil and gas companies like some of the other counties that are more reasonable and respect the industry. So I ask that you do not support this legislation. A lot of counties in the state of Colorado would like to keep their opportunity to continue to negotiate, to continue to do the memorandums of understanding, to take these issues case by case and not have us negatively impacted.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I promise you and the other members I don't intend to filibuster my own bill here, but I did want to go over a couple points that have been brought up. From the most recent backwards, the Northridge site that we're talking about, and you saw the pictures up here where the well site was within 100 feet of the property line, it actually involved more than one well. It was actually even more than 15 wells. So whatever you heard about the effects of the actual drilling process, you have to multiply it by 15 in order to get the real effect. And then, of course, there's the years where the tanks and the other operations are still affecting the area. It's not just the drilling itself. So I just wanted to make that clear. Now, we heard a little bit about the CDPHE report, and as much as I have to say I'm heartened by my colleagues' embrace of science in this case, I do want to point out, because a number of scientists, actual scientists, came in and testified at the Health, Environment, and Insurance Environment Committee. And they talked about the CDPHE report. It makes a contribution, but they said very importantly that no one report is either a smoking gun or an exoneration. And I hope maybe some folks will come up and put some slides of the other reports that were handed out to the committee that talked about the dangers of these operations. And I hope also maybe they'll put up some newspaper articles about the 2 states in the United States that have taken a look at this for years and have decided to ban fracking entirely because they're concerned about the dangers of it. So, like I said, no one report is a smoking gun or an exoneration. That's part of science. But that's not really even the main issue here. The main issue is that right now, under our current rules, the industry can put something that can explode just a couple hundred feet away from a playground, and that's not right. Let's kind of envision it, because some people don't maybe recognize how close we're talking about. From the front of this chamber to the back is 64 feet. 64 feet. Under our current rules, a drill rig can go right there where the sergeants are if a school property line is where the chair is. Do you think that's right? I'd like for someone to come up here and defend that, because accidents can happen, and they do happen. We heard in testimony about 2 different incidents that happened over the last couple of years where the kids had to go in and shelter in place in their school because, one, an elementary school near Firestone, there was a rig explosion and fire that took 2 hours for firefighters to put it out. The kids had to shelter in place because it was so close to the school. And then Erie High School, there was an incident with their well a couple of years ago where, again, the kids had to go inside and shelter in place, and they had to turn off the HVAC system in the school because of issues with the well. This is something that unfortunately happens and that we should account for in our rules. And that brings me to my next point, which is an argument that really let the agency take care of this, as if the legislature has no role whatsoever, as if the agency gets together and they just talk amongst themselves and maybe bring in some lobbyists and say, don't worry about it, nothing to see here, that we as the legislature should just say, no problem, and let's let it go. Well, I'll tell you, members, I know that you know this. If a constituent or others come to you in a town hall and they say, we've got a problem, it's not going to cut it to say, oh, some guys in an agency talked about this and brought in some lobbyists and talked about it and decided nothing should happen. That's not going to cut it. And that kicks the can down the road, and it's our responsibility as a legislature to address obvious problems in a rule. We do it all the time, and we should do it with this as well. I do want to mention something about the Oil and Gas Task Force, because it's really interesting how that dynamic played out a couple of years ago. At first, and just to remind folks, the Oil and Gas Task Force the governor put together was put together with a third of the folks from the oil and gas industry, a third that were environmental interests, and then kind of a third that represented different areas. Now, some of those third in the middle were clearly with oil and gas, and that's fine. That was part of the task force, no problem. Initially, the rule was that anything that got half of the votes of the committee could actually become a recommendation for the legislature or for the COGCC. But strangely enough, through the proceedings about halfway through, that rule was changed to 2/3 of a majority for any kind of recommendation that had to pass. Oil and gas had the votes to kill everything they wanted to kill, and they made it known to everybody else in the committee, we're not touching setbacks. We will not touch setbacks during this discussion. And indeed they didn't, because they could kill any kind of discussion that came forth on that matter. So where does that leave us? As a legislature that is supposed to be responsive to our constituents, should we just say that, well, some folks on a task force decided to not address it, so therefore that just takes it off the table from here on forever? That doesn't make sense, and again, that is not what our duty is as a legislative body. I do want to clarify one thing, and that is that the COGCC is actually not opposed to this bill. They came in and they testified, or they answered questions basically, and there were a lot of technical questions that the committee asked. They asked a lot of good questions. And one of the discussions that they had, which was actually quite informative, was about mineral rights. And the COGCC director did talk about mineral rights as opposed to surface property rights, and the fact that mineral rights, like anything else, are subjected to reasonable limitations. You can't, for example, and the person that testified on behalf of mineral rights owners conceded this, you can't, for example, put the drill rig 50 feet away from somebody's front door. That's not going to be reasonable in order to get those mineral rights. And in fact, that same person also mentioned, just on his own, that you can't put a drill rig in the middle of a fairway at a golf course either, because that's not going to be very reasonable. To which I say, if you can't put it in the middle of a golf course, then maybe we should consider not putting it so close to school property as well. One final thing I want to mention is there's been some discussion about so-called attacking the industry. And I want to draw your attention, and maybe you have seen information about this. There have been meetings around the state, particularly in the affected areas, not just East Boulder County. They haven't been drilling in East Boulder County, by the way, for the last 5 years, if you didn't notice. But say in Broomfield County or Adams County and other places around the Front Range. In Broomfield County, they had a meeting. They had to move it to the First Bank Center off of US 36 because they had 1,000 people that showed up. And I guarantee if you talk to those 1,000 people, many of them, they would be the ones that would feel under attack, because these facilities are going into their neighborhoods and next to their schools, just 64 feet away from a playground under the rules. They would be the ones that would feel that way. This is a reasonable statute, this is a reasonable bill, and a reasonable way to address what's happening more and more around the state.
Representative Rankin, who's looking particularly handsome coming up to next week.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this is an important and interesting debate, and particularly so to me. I've been following this for about 5 years. There are about 12,000 wells in my district, and Representative Foote and I have had this discussion for years now about the differences. You know, some of the wells in my district, I'd be happy with a 50-mile setback. There is nothing within 50 miles. But there are also areas like in Parachute, Battlement Mesa, where a large subdivision is, you know, equivalent to what you might find in Weld County or Boulder County Front Range. So I've had both. I've had a lot of debates and time over that. But you know, given that debate, and in fact, I think we'll have this every year, and I think it's important, and it's really good to talk about it. It's one of the most important industries in our state and one of the most important issues to our constituents, all of them. So we should have the debate. But we've heard a lot of hyperbole, we've heard a lot of what-ifs, we've heard about explosions and earthquakes and all these what-ifs. But, you know, there really is some good news. I mean, the good news is that the gas industry in this state has helped the economy, but it's also, all you folks on this side, dramatically lowering the carbon released in the atmosphere through power production. Natural gas is a major contributor to atmospheric improvement. It's also true that our national economy has benefited greatly, and our national defense posture and national stance around the world is dramatically improved by natural gas. So we should find a way to balance, shouldn't we? Shouldn't we look for balance here? Shouldn't we protect our citizens and also celebrate an industry that's doing wonderful things for our state? Why can't we do that? So the good news is that we lead the nation in analysis. About 5 years ago, Garfield County, my county, spent $200,000 with CSU and lead, one of the first studies of emissions from gas wells. They not only looked at the actual products being emitted, but the time nature, you know, because these things have a very different time cycle, drilling and then completion, fracking, to actual production. And they looked at wind effects and plumes and those sorts of things. And that information contributed to the CDPHE study, which included front range analysis. So we lead the nation in understanding the science. We lead the nation in inspection of our sites and the fracking process, as well as the completion process, and now looking at the pipelines that gather gas and send it on. So the good news is that we are a national leader in these things. We should be looking at those processes and making sure that the science is right, that the inspection is right, and that we move forward with technology, rather than taking incremental approaches to try to punish an industry through hyperbole and what ifs. So, you know, I'm actually very proud of this industry, and I'm proud of OGCC for what they're doing. So let's make sure we do that right and quit trying to kill the industry as a solution to a problem that we are well along to taking care of.
Representative Lebsack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad my colleague from the West Slope brought up balance, because let's talk a little bit about balance. And that's the reason why I really enjoy this legislature and Colorado, because a lot of times we're able to find that balance. In the state of Maryland yesterday, they decided in their legislature to completely ban fracking. Okay, so that's one side. That's not what this bill is asking us to do. This is a balanced bill. This bill on one side doesn't say go ahead and put up your developments anywhere you'd like to. It doesn't do that. And it doesn't ban fracking. It finds the balance. Right? And the balance is we want to keep our children safe on the ball field, right? Or on the playground. We can respect the industry, respect the process of the COGCC, and at the same time want our children to be safe. Another one of my colleagues from Arapahoe County, comes from local government, and I appreciate her input on this subject. And she insinuated that this bill would circumvent local control. Well, let's talk about local control a little bit. We've tried that, right? There's been a number of communities that took a vote, and and the courts determined that they were going to go a different direction. And so if we're not going to give local control, and if the courts and the governor is opposed to allowing local control, then we need to do something else, right? And so that's what this something else is. This bill says, statewide, we believe that it's reasonable for there to be developments happening in the state of Colorado. But if we're going to allow these developments to happen, and they're legal, and we had another colleague talk about economic development and all of that, I'll give you that. But let's just set some reasonable parameters. We can respect the industry, respect the COGCC, and just simply say that we're not going to allow large industry immediately next to, within feet from our children on the playground. And that's all this bill does. And so I'm really glad that my colleague brought up balance, because I think that's what this bill is a balance. It's certainly not a ban on fracking, and it's not allowing any development to happen anywhere, circumventing local control. It finds the balance. We're going to respect the industry, respect the COGCC's decision-making, and also keep our children safe and not be literally a few feet away from a playground. I ask for a yes vote.
Representative Neville. Representative Covarrubias.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, everybody. As somebody who is trained and been in the gas and industry business for over a decade, and been in the infrastructure business for 35 years here in Denver and in the Colorado area, I have a different understanding of what this looks like than probably anybody in here, because I don't know that we have fitters and frackers that actually do this for a living. The reason why I know that this is an attack on the energy industry is because when I was on the Planning Commission for the City of Brighton, this all is about setbacks And what they brought to us was a 2,500-foot setback, because the setback is from buildings, from water sources, from parks, from numerous different things. This isn't just about a setback from a school. So what ends up happening is, if you have, the more setback you have, the less wells you have overall. And at 2,500 feet, you destroy the industry completely, and they know it. The most dangerous part of any of our day, and this is a fact, is driving to and from work. So if you're going to ban anything that could be dangerous, you can ban cars and planes and boats and every darn thing out there that could be dangerous. I don't like when we use children as political shields, because when they show the picture of the facility, they leave people out of it. They're not showing the families and the workers on that facility sitting out there, and what that looks like to the economy. And I would suggest to you that the severance tax and the money that we're getting built the school, or had a lot to do with building the school in the first place. Look, the frackers in Colorado go above and beyond federal regulation. They go above and beyond the state regulations, which is the most stringent in the United States of America. Colorado has very strict laws, and the fracking industry follows them and goes past that to an incredible degree. The sites are safe. They are productive for the state of Colorado. And first of all, they asked us, well, we don't want our schools by power lines. Then they said, we don't want you to burn coal anymore. Well, can you burn it cleaner? Yeah, we burned coal 97% clean. We got to that point. Then when we got to that point, they said, oh, wait a minute, we don't want you burning coal anymore. Now we want to revert everything to natural gas. So we did. We changed all the piping and all the turbines and everything in the substations and switched it over to natural gas. I know that. I was there. After we switched over to natural gas, then we have an attack on natural gas and on fracking, where it all comes from. It's nice and warm in here, nice and cozy. I would also suggest to you that the meters that run up to this building, to every school, has gas running to the meters and has gas running all through the school to keep them warm in the winter times. It's a comfort. We do it safely. The fitters know their jobs, and these people that are doing this for a living are professionals. I'm a no vote on this.
Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I appreciate the spirited debate this morning. I wanted to make 3 principal points in my return to the well on this bill. First of all, we're not scientists, members. Let's stop pretending we are. We might have, well, there are a few scientists in the chamber, Representative Hansen. But for the most part, we are not experts in this area. Let's defer to experts who have spent much more time than we have analyzing the data and looking at the science behind regulation. Number 2, what more do we want of this industry other than we don't want this industry? Let me say that again. What more do we want of the industry other than we don't want them? We've heard several times about how we're not banning fracking. It seems to me that continuing to say we're not doing that begs the question of why we're questioning the experts. We've had colleagues talking about balance. Well, either you trust the COGCC in this process or you do not trust them. And I'd suggest to you that the balance already exists in the procedures of the COGCC. I don't want to belabor this point, but I think it's worth going over this in some detail. If a company wants to conduct production less than 1,000 feet from a school, a daycare center, or other high occupancy building, and we've talked about how quickly that can happen. Well, let's actually talk about what happens when a company asks to engage in activities within that area. Well, first of all, they have a very high burden of proof. It's a very high hurdle to overcome. And they have to demonstrate why they need to locate the wells or the facility inside the setback. Number two, assuming the commission approved the location inside of the setback, the regulations mandate very stringent mitigation measures for the site, including the following things: noise, a closed-loop drilling system, green completions, working with local governments on a traffic plan, installing blowout preventer equipment, and those are just a few of the requirements that the COGC would impose. Number three, these mitigation measures become part of the company's permit as conditions for approval. And if the company fails to abide by those provisions, they're subject to significant monetary penalties. The last thing I'm going to say is this process doesn't happen overnight. You're asking to conduct operations inside the 1,000-foot setback. You're looking at a process that occurs upwards of a year as a result of a rigorous review by the COGCC. So members, I think it's appropriate for us to talk about the industry, but let's not make sure that we don't substitute our professional judgment for those who certainly have much more substantive expertise than we do. Again, I ask for a no vote on this bill.
Representative Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I am not an expert on this, and I come to this as a layman and a legislator trying to figure out what the policy balance is. And I lean on folks, the good folks who rely on science and have demonstrated science and do the work, the good folks at the COGCC. And it's important, and I've got an image here I'd like to have distributed or displayed. It's important because when we push out of balance, it creates all sorts of policy havoc in other areas of the jobs we're trying to do. The consequences of creating imbalance in the various taxes that are provided to the policy apparatus of the state government and local governments through severance taxes, sales taxes on extraction and support services, federal mineral royalty distributions, property taxes, and state royalties are all you can create an imbalance, which in fact creates a pinch and a problem. And just look at this graph. What we saw, and this was from an economic impact, an economic imbalance between 09 and 10 to the state of Colorado. The impact was $500 million in a downsweep, in an imbalance that was created by exogenous forces, economic forces in this instance. I would argue that items like this bill, like 1256, also run the risk, create the possibility of creating an instability, an imbalance, a drawdown, and a reduction in taxes available to, in fact, serve the students that this bill ostensibly seeks to protect. So I think it's important that we not rush to the judgment of, in our imprecise policy expertise, and run past the information that is provided to us through science, through folks who deal with this on a daily basis, the good folks at COGCC, and quite frankly, the good folks in the industry who, in my opinion, are the most expert at making sure their operations are safe and appropriate for the state of Colorado. I rise in strong opposition to 1256.
Representative Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also rise in opposition to 1256. And, you know, for those of us that have studied regulatory agencies, when you have a group of experts in a certain business activity who are tasked with protecting public health and safety based on empirical data, the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission has a process where those who believe regulation is not sufficiently protective of public health and safety can file a petition with the agency to look at the data. Does anybody disagree that this should be driven by empirical data? So I fail to understand why we are here today with a piece of legislation not supported by that empirical data, when there is a process available in front of the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. If the data was compelling that this restriction was needed, that is the process that is open to you. I request a no on 1256.
Representative Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, Greeley, which is part of Weld County, which is a county I'm very proud of, produces 90% of the oil and gas for the state of Colorado. And Dr. Larry Wolk with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment did a study on Weld County. And the statistics show that there actually is even fewer instances of asthma, cancer, birth defects, infant mortality, low birth weights than any other counties in the Front Range. Folks, we have been doing oil and gas in Weld County for over 30 years, with at least 10,000 wells or more in Weld County. It is obvious that we would be the canary in the mines. We would know, because we've been doing it for years. And Dr. Larry Wolk says there is not an issue. So I'm tired of the scare tactics that the opponents or the supporters of this bill are handing us down. I also want to address Representative Salazar's, and he was saying the surface rights. You know, we just came through a recession, and there is no guarantees in the value of your property rights. So oil and gas isn't in that arena of affecting surface rights. That happens to anybody, any place, anytime. Thank you for your attention.
Representative Lebsack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to respond briefly to some remarks that were talking about regulatory agencies. My colleague from El Paso County was talking, essentially saying that when you've got a regulatory agency, allow the regulatory agency to do their job, was the argument. But let me tell you the reason why sometimes the legislature has to come in and actually legislate. February of 2016, the COGCC, which is the regulatory agency that regulates oil and gas in the state of Colorado, stated the following. They made the following rule. They said, if you're an oil and gas operator and you're planning on putting your development within a municipality, then you need to share your plans, your 5-year plans with the city. And everybody said, you know what, that sounds kind of reasonable. That's reasonable. So that the city can put your development plans in their city planning document, in their comprehensive plan for the city. That's reasonable. And the industry didn't fight too much. But you know what the COGCC did not do? They said if the development happens in the unincorporated area of the county, you don't have to go to the county and share your plans. So that's the reason why, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes legislators have to legislate and do the right thing for the people of Colorado. So we talked about the regulatory agency. In this case is the COGCC. The COGCC determined that it's appropriate for the oil and gas industry to share their plans with the municipality if the footprint of that development was going to be within the city boundary. But if it's across the street in the unincorporated area of the county, they're not required to share their plans. That's the reason why legislators have to do their job and see where there's discrepancies and when there's inequality and where there needs to be a bill that puts reasonable parameters, that respects the industry, but also respects public safety. And so, getting back to the bill, all this bill does is respects the industry, respects the COGC process, and says we as legislators are going to do our job and recognize that just a couple hundred feet away from a playground, we're not going to allow a huge development, but we're going to support it throughout the state. That's all this bill does, and I ask for a yes vote.
Representative Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I rise in strong opposition to House Bill 17, 1256. And I understand that the bill sponsor is representing his district. But I stand in opposition to the bill based on the science. And in committee, I listened closely, and I voted no. And one thing I noticed was that CDPHE did not testify in favor. The COGCC did not testify in favor. DOR didn't testify in favor. The governor's office did not testify in favor. And I'm a little troubled because this bill would suggest, in my view, that these folks are derelict, not doing their jobs, not looking out for the citizens of our state in the way that they're supposed to. And I strongly disagree with the testimony that says that a bill is necessary when we have regulatory agencies who are extremely diligent and could deal with this in rule at any time if they thought it was necessary. I understand that there are many folks that came down and testified, and we listened and we heard their concerns, and a lot of them expressed not simply support for this bill, but just opposition to gas and oil in general. And they want something done. I understand that, and I think that makes about as much sense as what we saw in 2003 with the magazine ban and the gun lobby, or anti-gun lobby. So I really have a strong conviction that the science doesn't support this bill. Any industry, not just gas and oil, but any industry within 1,000 feet could have an accident, or any vehicle carrying any sort of hazmats or something within several thousand feet of a school could have an accident, and that's effectively what this does. This pushes the radius out from the school buildings, potentially out to thousands of feet with the language as it's written. I think it sets a bad precedent. Like I said, we have these regulatory agencies that can deal with this by rule. It's not necessary. And if we are so concerned, why isn't there, even more of a radius being called for than even 5,000 feet from school property if this is such a hazard? I don't see anybody running an amendment from the other side of the aisle to do that if they're so concerned about the safe space, as some are so offended by the sight of any sort of gas and oil operations in the area. And I also wanted to discuss a little bit the testimony by Dallas Wright. She's a CEO of Quality Environmental Professional Associates. She worked in the government and private sector for over 30 years in the fields of epidemiology and toxicology, and even worked for the Centers for Disease Control in the past. And in her assessment, in terms of distance, that the notion that distance will decrease health impact, she stated that currently all data show that air samples, the only potential completed pathway, are below a level of health concern. The charge that fracking chemicals could cause harm, again, she stated only if there were completed exposure routes at levels that are above federal guidelines. The only potential complete exposure route is ambient air, but the levels are below health guidelines. Another question is, has to do with studies that have shown an association between fracking and health. And the proponents of the bill asked, doesn't that mean that fracking activities are causing health issues? She stated that association does not mean causation. An association simply means there could be a relationship between A and B. To determine the validity of the relationship, confounding relationships have to be evaluated. To date, the studies that have claimed association have also claimed that the validity of their study is limited because they were not able to or did not evaluate confounding relationships. Cause and effect has not been proven. She also talked about the minimal risk level. The minimal risk level is an estimate of the daily human exposure to a hazardous substance that is likely to be without appreciable risk of adverse non-cancer health effects over a specified duration of exposure. They're used by health assessors to identify contaminants and potential health effects that may be of concern at hazardous waste sites. She said they are below levels that might cause adverse health effects in the people most sensitive to such chemical-induced effects. And the minimal risk levels are derived for acute 1 to 14 days and intermediate 15 to 364 days and chronic over 365 days or longer durations. The chronic minimal risk level is based on the average exposure over a lifetime. And she concluded that air sampling data of the studies falls below the chronic minimal risk level. Even the most recent work by CSU indicates that right at the well pads, the levels are expected to be almost 30 times less than the minimal risk level. At 240 feet from the pad, the expected benzene levels are 0.1 part per billion, which is 30 times below the chronic MRL. So again, we sat in committee for hours and hours and heard a lot of really good testimony. But in the end, I couldn't support the bill because I don't think the science is there at all for the bill. And so again, I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Sane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
It is an honor to serve with you. I will note that nobody else has said that yet, and so you win the day.
Thank you very much. Members, I know there's reality and there's political reality. And the political reality for many folks who are concerned about our environment is that oil and gas is dangerous, and I've heard some comments made by the side of the aisle that thousands of children are being harmed. I would like to see those busloads of children myself. It's, I live in Weld County, live pretty close to oil and gas operations. So I would suggest that if really thousands of children are being harmed, if that's really the argument, you should really go ahead and ban oil and gas. Not tiptoe next to it and say, come a little further, go a little further, let's just do this dance and, we're going to make this political statement. So I'm going to help out here, and I'm going to make the bill consistent with reality. So I'm going to move Amendment L006 and ask that it be properly displayed.
Excuse me, the amendment is properly before us. Please proceed.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what this amendment does is it goes to page 2, right after line 12. And basically, we're making things consistent. It says, the General Assembly recognizes that oil and gas operations currently meet this requirement, which is the 1,000 feet, in their operations, and hydraulic fracturing projects occur more than 1,000 feet below ground. Because if we're talking about fracking, let's really make sure we're understanding the parameters where fracking actually happens. Fracking happens generally about 5,000 feet to 7,000 feet in Weld County. So therefore, vertically, obviously, because property rights do extend vertically, They already meet this requirement that the bill is stating. We actually already meet that in Weld County, by 5 to 7 times more than that 1,000 feet from the school property line. This is where fracking actually occurs. In the ingredients in fracking fluid, sand, we've got water. I don't think I've ever heard a child being, hurt by gar gum, because that's one of the lubricants in fracking fluid. So let's just talk about the education piece just for a second. And this is to the bill, because this bill is trying to educate the public as well, and I appreciate that. So we'll just make that consistent. But oil and gas, hydraulic fracturing, this is one of the most highly regulated states in the nation. We've heard that. The reason why there's reports of certain things happening is because if they spill a cup of coffee in the ground, they have to report it. I don't think that's endangering any children. In addition to that, some of the statistics cited by Representative Buck are completely and totally true. Denver is more dangerous to your health than Weld County is, so we should probably ban Denver. Just saying. So oil and gas fracturing is good for families. It keeps our prices down. This is a great industry. So again, I'm just moving this amendment to make sure we're staying consistent, that we're not trying to decry an industry, but at the same time say, yeah, just go just a little bit further and it'll be okay. But it's horribly dangerous and it's going to kill everybody. Let's just make sure we're consistent in our message as well, because we do represent not only our district, but we represent the whole state. And people are listening to this, they're watching. So let's make sure people know that hydraulic fracturing does happen at about 5,000 to 7,000 feet below ground. A lot of that oil and gas drilling does happen in Weld County. We do have some of the cleanest air in the state. And I love living there. And, I'm very proud of what we've done with the regulations that we do have in place to protect folks. It's working, obviously. We've got those air monitors. So I urge a yes vote on this amendment.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know, maybe we can make an argument this doesn't fit under the title, but I don't think that really matters so much, because the amendment really is just not what this bill is about. This bill isn't about how far underground oil and gas operations go when they frack. This bill is how close the operations are to schools and how absurdly close they are to playgrounds, to modular classrooms, to athletic facilities, just a matter of a couple hundred feet in many instances. That's what we're talking about here, and that's what's not reasonable. So I think the folks perhaps at, say, Erie High School, when their kids had to shelter in place after there was an incident in a nearby well, or the parents of kids that were at the elementary school near Frederick when they also had to shelter in place after an explosion at a nearby well, really wouldn't care about how deep underground the fracking operation went. They just don't want these things exploding next to the playground or next to a modular classroom. That's the bottom line. That's why this is such a reasonable bill, and I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Representative Liston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And by the way, it's a pleasure to serve with you.
It is a pleasure and honor to serve with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I have a bionic eye. I do have my eye issues, but just to kind of give you an idea of what 1,000 feet is, I was able to measure accurately with my bionic eye. Just to give you an idea, from here at the Capitol where we are to the city and county building over here just to the west of us is about 1,000 feet, plus or minus 10 feet, So, just to, that's why I think this is a good amendment. 1,000 feet below the ground is a long ways. So if there is any type of adverse action, which is very rare in fracking, that's just to give you an idea, 1,000 feet plus or minus 10 feet. I urge and I vote for L00. Which one is this?
6.
6. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion of L006? Representative Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I rise in support of Amendment L006, and I think that this adds a clarification, doesn't doesn't hurt anything. I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think a lot of folks don't know, that this fracking is occurring at a depth where there are, extremely rare instances, if any, where it would cause any kind of an issue with groundwater or that sort of thing, and that the fluids used are safe. And I think this is a good amendment, and we should adopt it. I urge an aye vote.
Is there any other discussion on L006? Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me adjust this to my handicap real quick. So back to this amendment, and again, I was introducing this amendment to address some of the concerns I heard on the side of the aisle. One of the concerns I heard was earthquakes, and we've had this discussion before in this very same spot, and we've got data to prove that some of the worst earthquakes that happened in northern Colorado were in the mid-1800s. Lots of cluster earthquakes, and I'm pretty sure we will not fracking during that time period. Now, Weld County has been fracking for over 40 years, and so far, no wells have been contaminated. And again, it almost seems like the closer you live to a well, the healthier you are, just based on some of the stats in Weld County. And like I said, our rates of cancer, and also brought this up, rates of cancer are lower, rates of birth defects. There's a lot of things that go on, a lot of measures that you can put across the state. And we rate the best. And we certainly have the largest oil and gas operations, per person in the state. So again, I would urge a yes vote on this amendment. Let's make sure we're educating people properly about this really great industry and what it does for our economy, what it does for our families. It provides jobs. And let's just make sure that we are talking about facts and not fiction or fears of environmentalists who want a oil and gas safe space. That's not something provided for in our Constitution, oil and gas safe space. We want to make sure that property rights are respected. And if you want a safe space that has been put in place 4 years ago, let's see how that works. We haven't seen any news reports about things exploding or children getting sick. So I would urge a yes vote on this very common sense amendment.
Any other discussion on L006? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L006. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The amendment fails. To the bill, Representative Wilson.
Yes. Bionic tongue. No. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On further reflection, members, Representative Foote, I think you've been able to almost sway me. In fact, I think I'm not sure where I am on this bill now due to your great arguments, my bionic ears. And I did hear what my esteemed colleague, the chairman of the local government committee, said about how the legislature needs to legislate at times and take the reins when the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission has not been able to do its job. And so, I'm trying to be proactive and think ahead. As some of you know, I'm an Eagle Scout, and our motto is be prepared. So, and I also believe in the old idea, the old sage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so with this in mind, I would like to move L007, otherwise known as the Children's Amendment for the children. So I move ask that L007 be displayed.
All right, the amendment is properly before us. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Member, this is for the Children's Amendment, and essentially what this amendment does is if the drilling is so dangerous, then this is really a preventative measure to keep new and future schools away from this dangerous industry. And I liken this to really keeping buildings and children away from electric transmission lines and wind farms and wind towers and so forth. So what this does is that no future schools, new schools, can be built within 1,000 feet of existing or newly developed oil and gas basins. I ask for an aye vote on L007. This will truly save the children in the future for Colorado so that they do not ever, new schools do not ever get within 1,000 feet of oil and gas operations. I'd ask for an aye vote.
Representative Foote.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And for those folks that are always citing the COGCC, I think you'll understand that this actually doesn't fit within the COGCC rules at all. The burden is on the oil and gas industry, not about other structures. So when you're talking about houses, hospitals, everything else, it actually is where the oil and gas structure should be located away from those structures. So I understand the sentiment. I get it. But if the argument on this side is that we should just comport our statute to the COGCC rules, then this goes way above and beyond what we have already, and that's not how the COGCC rules work. So as much as I like it, and as much as I think that we should change the COGCC rules, by the way, because it seems in many cases they're not adequate, this bill is really focused on the distance that the schools are from well facilities coming up, and it's proactive to the oil and gas industry, not the schools. So I ask for a no vote.
Minority Leader Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I think this amendment actually really hits at the heart of the matter here. As we've heard, every single well that they've brought up as an example was an existing well prior to anything that the school district built. Now, I would say that the school district, before they built these facilities and these ballparks that everyone's so scared of, they probably did their due diligence and realized that there was no threat. I don't know if any of you have been on a tour to any of these facilities, but it's quite amazing. They can take a lighter and just the butane from the lighter detect the leak of a lighter. They're that safe. That's probably why they were okay building these next two existing facilities, but I don't think we should lose that point. We see these pictures and these fear-mongering that gets put up here about how there's a huge concern. Well, those wells were already in existence prior to any ballpark that was being built. So I think the school district probably did their due diligence, but if you truly think that there should be a setback, you should also be concerned with having new school district facilities built near existing wells. So thank you for this amendment.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask for a title ruling.
We'll stand in brief recess. The chair finds that the amendment does not fit under the title of the bill, or a single subject, or whatever I need to find. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L008 and ask that it be properly displayed.
The amendment is properly before us. Please proceed.
The previous amendment was, I believe, ruled not to be within the title because of future wells. And so what this amendment does is it takes out the future wells aspect and only applies to all other wells. So I ask for an aye vote on this.
Representative Sane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I like the intent of the amendment. We're here educating this morning, apparently, about oil and gas. And I just want to bring up again, and this is something I heard happen in committee. I wasn't actually in the committee, but Representative Foote actually referenced 4 schools in Weld County, I believe, that chose to be right next to oil and gas facilities. So in that vein, I would actually urge a no vote on this amendment only because we should respect their decision to do so. If they want to be right next to an oil and gas facility, they should do that. That's their, you know, we're talking about property rights here. Let's make it equal on both sides. But I understand the intent of this amendment. It does fit under the title because it does apply to both schools and applies to oil and gas facilities. If this helps clarify, you know, making sure that, you know, the bill's really trying to keep us 1,000 feet away from schools. This amendment also justifies that intent as well. But I would urge a no vote. Just, again, back to if Weld County schools want to do this, let them do it.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have a question for the amendment sponsor on this, and it might help me make up my mind about this amendment. But is the amendment sponsor conceding that having oil and gas facilities within 1,000 feet of the school is dangerous? Because that's not what the industry is telling us. The industry is telling us nothing to see here, no problems, it's completely safe. But does the bill or the amendment sponsor actually think otherwise?
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the purpose of answering the question, I'm going to go ahead and defer to Representative Larry Liston.
Representative Liston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Representative Foote, no, I don't believe that that we're conceding the point that oil and gas production within 1,000 feet of a school or of anybody is dangerous. So no, this substitute amendment was brought forward just as a last minute idea, but no, I don't concede that that there should not be any oil and gas production within 1,000 feet, or that it's dangerous.
Representative Humphrey.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the debate this morning. And I think that this amendment could also be known as the No New Schools in Weld County Amendment. I think this would be a huge boon for homeschoolers in our state, and I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you for coming.
Is there any other discussion? Representative Foote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I'm not sure why the amendment's being brought if the proponents and the supporters of the amendment don't think that it's dangerous for oil and gas facilities to be close to schools. I guess there's a cognitive dissonance there with me, and so I'm just thinking that we should not support this amendment, so I ask for a no vote.
Is there any other discussion of Amendment L008? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L008. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The amendment fails. Is there any additional discussion? We are back to the bill. Is there any other discussion of House Bill 1256? Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, I can see that you're still all hanging on the edge of your chairs during this debate. At least those of us that are left in here, right? Many of you have heard my mantra for presenting here under the Golden Dome. It's brevity, levity, and repetition. And in light of the length of this debate, repetition won't happen, and it will be brief. But I would like to share with you some actual experience of someone who has experienced what we're talking about rather than looking at it from a 30,000-foot level. Someone who has actually had experience with a school that had oil and gas wells in close proximity. So now maybe there's some others. Is there anyone else in here who's had responsibility for a school district had an oil and gas well right next to it? Didn't think so. Didn't think so. Before I start that, just a comment about the earthquakes in Oklahoma. The 3.0 incident started, since I'm from the Kansas and Oklahoma area, I know about these things, still have a daughter in Oklahoma. The 3.0 intensity of earthquakes began in 2009. Fracking and the water injection well has been around a whole lot longer than that, for decades. One of the studies that's being done now, are you ready for this? Hang on to those seats you're sitting on the edge of. They're looking into the vibration from wind farms on causing the earthquakes. Just saying. So, in terms of the schools, my experience was in Attica. That's Kansas, not the prison in New York, okay? In Attica, Kansas, it was established in 1885 before Colorado became a state. Been doing a lot of things a long time before we got to them here in Colorado. I began my work in 1978 in Attica. Not long after that, an oil and gas boom struck. There were wells everywhere. I could look out my office window and see the well across the street from our tennis court, which our tennis court was on that section, and it brought in $178 a month to the school. We could surface that tennis court and take care of it with the royalties off that gas well that was there. As a school district, we continued to have fire drills. We continued to have tornado drills. We did not institute an oil and gas drill, ever. The district is still there. The oil and gas boom has gone up and down. But what my point is, folks, unless you've experienced it, then we're supposing, just suppose. What if something would happen? Well, let me tell you what happened as a result of that oil and gas. The tennis court is second to none. The school that we built was paid off in 10 years instead of 20. There's a new community recreation center that includes not only a facility for the school, but a facility for the community. Those are the benefits of what has happened there. And do you think for a moment, if we had not been concerned about the safety of our kids, that we would not have been throwing a fit over those oil and gas wells? Those were our children. Those were my children in that school building. And we were confident that the industry had control over it. And here's the bottom line. Kansas controls over oil and gas pale in comparison to the controls we have in Colorado. We have more controls in Colorado than we had in Kansas. I did not go to school one day out of 13 years in that district and worry about those oil and gas wells that were sitting there across the street. We have enough regulations, folks. All we have to do is let them take their own effect and take their own time and take control of the situation. Oil and gas benefits the community, it benefits the state, and for us to start putting more and more regulations on it will slowly start strangulating the very thing that keeps us going. So I urge a no vote.
Is there any other discussion on House Bill 1256? Going once. The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1256. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. House Bill 1256 passes. Madam Majority Leader.
I feel like. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1190 one day till Wednesday, March 29th.
Seeing no objection, House Bill 1190 will be laid over one day until tomorrow. Mr. Randall, will you please read the title of Senate Bill 112?
Senate Bill 112 by Senator Neville, also Representative Pabon, concerning a clarification of the effect of statutes and limitations on the dispute resolution process when a taxpayer owes sales or use tax to one local government but has erroneously paid the disputed tax to another local government.
I suspect I will call eventually on the esteemed Finance Chairman, Representative Pabon. I suspect that will occur soon. I'll bang the gavel in the meantime.
Representative Pabon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move Senate Bill 112 and the Local Government Committee Report.
To the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we had a very good local government hearing. It was very thorough. I want to thank Representative Lebsack for his help in carefully crafting a compromise that allowed the Colorado Municipal League, as well as many of the proponents of the bill, to find a kumbaya moment. But there was one minor change that we needed to make to really achieve perfection. And that change is L005. So I move L005 and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L005 to the committee report in search of perfection is properly before us. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And L005 essentially says that you must comply with the notice that is received and do so in such a way that if you have a second notice that you receive, you must comply with that notice within 90 days of that notice. Otherwise, you cannot take advantage of the remedies that are spelled out in the bill that essentially prevents the use of non-payment or payment of double taxation is the issue in this bill. So this deals with that timeline and chronology for what happens on the joinder actions on a first notice and then a subsequent second notice if that happens. Ask for an aye vote.
Is there any other discussion of Amendment L005 to the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L. Oh, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Pabon, who is asking for this amendment?
Representative Pabon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Representative Dan Pabon. Seriously, though, this is a consensus amendment of CML, KC, and all the stakeholders involved. We have agreement on this in order to reach perfection.
Okay, thank you.
At this point, is there any other discussion of Amendment L005? Seeing none, the question is the adoption of Amendment L005 to the Local Government Committee report. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. To the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that, I think we have a perfected committee report. Ask for an aye vote.
Is there any additional discussion of the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Local Government Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The committee report is adopted. To the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senate Bill 112 has a long history, back to 1985, in fact, where the legislature, our predecessors, attempted to address the issue when a taxpayer could be in a situation where they would pay taxes twice. And you would ask yourself, well, how could that happen in this day and age? And the answer is because, as many of you know, and I think my friend Representative Kraft Tharp and maybe others are working on this issue, where we have multiple sales tax jurisdictions that overlap, the geographies don't necessarily follow a certain boundary, and so it can be very confusing, a very Byzantine structure for many of our taxpayers to follow. And so in 1985, our predecessors addressed this issue. However, in 2014, the Court of Appeals, who is trying to interpret what our predecessors didn't exactly get it quite right, which resulted in a taxpayer paying a tax to two jurisdictions, same tax. So what this bill sets out is a process by which incorrectly paid government can essentially, or basically a government that is due their taxes can put the taxpayer on notice that those taxes should be paid, and then we follow a process by which we join the other local government to essentially figure out the situation. And this, again, has the support of many of the stakeholders in the building. The majority leader asked specifically about them. I wanted to make sure I addressed that. But this is a good bill. It's a good taxpayer bill. It's a good government bill. It's a good bill for the people of Colorado. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any additional discussion of Senate Bill 112? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 112. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate Bill 112 is adopted. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar till tomorrow, Wednesday, March 28th.
Seeing no objection, the balance of the calendar.
29th.
The balance of the calendar will be laid over until March 29th. Briefly, before your next motion, I would like to clarify one thing. I did have a brief conversation with the chief clerk, who does inform me I lack the proper authority to abolish the Coat Rule. Thus, it will come back tomorrow and be subject to each additional chair. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for doing a fabulous job today. And I move that we rise and report.
Seeing no objection, the committee will rise and report.
The House will come to order. Mr. Randall, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Madam Speaker, your committee of the whole begs lead a report that's under its consideration following attached bills being the second reading thereof makes the following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1219, House Bill 1236 is amended, House Bill 1256 is amended, passed on second reading order, engrossed, placed on the counter for third reading, final passage. Senate Bill 112 is amended, passed on second reading order, revised, placed on the counter for third reading, final passage. House Bill 1190, House Bill 1217, Senate Bill 179 laid over until March 29, 2017, retaining their place on the calendar. Senate Bill 184 may laid over until April 3rd, 2017, retaining their place on the calendar.
Representative Gray. Members, you have heard the motion, and there are no amendments at the desk. Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote on the report of the Committee of the Whole. Representative Hooton. Representative Hooton is excused. Please close the machine. With 43 yes votes, 21 no votes, 1 excused, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. And that is all we are going to do today. So, announcements and introductions. I have one announcement. For the Appropriations Committee on March 29th, Representative Humphrey will replace Representative Everett. Representative Janal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. HIE, we are going to meet immediately in room 107. We're only going to hear one bill today, and that bill will be 1285. But please be down there as soon as you can. Thank you.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of the Public Health Insurance Committee, or Public Health and Human Services Committee, we will not be meeting immediately, but we will be meeting at 1:30. We will be hearing 2 bills, but we will not be hearing Senate Bill 25. Senate Bill 25 will be laid over. Look forward to seeing you at 1:30.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Judiciary Committee will be meeting upon adjournment. We want to get through the one bill we have on the morning calendar. Thank you.
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, yes, the Business Affairs and Labor Committee will be meeting at 1:30 today, and this is the day that we have been waiting for. We have some great bills. House Bill 1270 by Representative Lawrence and myself. Representative 1119 by myself. And Senate Bill 148. This is the bill of the year. Sunset Continue Office of Boxing by Representative Garnett. We will not be hearing 1202 by Representative Harrod, plumber qualifications supervision today. So if you were wanting that, I'm sorry, another time. Thank you.
All right, further announcements or introductions? Seeing no further announcements or introductions, Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we stand in recess till 1:30 today.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess until 1:30 today.